Right, so it's worth me starting this by saying that I have absolutely no clue what this graphics card is. It looks terrible. It genuinely looks awful, and I must have just whacked it in the drawer at some point, but I don't remember seeing that. It's got two mini DisplayPort connectors, HDMI and DVI, and it's got this what looks to be a custom cooler bolted on top. That's not a good noise. I'm also getting black gunk on my fingers from touching underneath it. Are there any signs what this is? Well, it's got 2GB ticked down the bottom, so we know that's the 2GB version of whatever this card is. And on the back we have the answer. It is a VX7870 2GB GDDR5. It's GCN again. It's GCN again. I cannot escape GCN. I was trying to do something that wasn't GCN this week. I think it's a 7870. It should be a 7870. Who knows? Plug it in. Now, it's probably worth noting that I'm just waiting on my post. I've got some really interesting things coming in the post, but none of them arrived. So at first I was going to benchmark this GTX 960 that I've just kept in my bag for ages. But apparently this doesn't work anymore. Apparently this is just completely dead, so this isn't getting a video. So instead we've got this mystery card from the drawer, and it is disgusting. It is filthy, it is dirty, it is a mystery. You know, knowing my luck, this will turn on. And that's going to be the worst bit about all of this, is it will just work. It takes two 6-pins. 1, 2. I suppose we turn it on and find out what this card does. The PC has just turned off and on 3 times. It's on. Oh, of course this works. Right, if it is a 7870, find some drivers on here. Well, we're going to test it. We're going to test it because it's Friday. I've got a couple of hours free, and I was gonna make a video on something interesting, but instead we are now looking at this. I think, for reference, off the top of my head, these cards are like £5 to £15 now. So if this video is something you've been looking for a while, they are worthless now. Look at what kind of abomination that's been put on there. I'm assuming VX on here means VTX, which was the cheapest and nastiest brand you could buy for AMD graphics cards during this era. I know I had one. My first PC used a VTX card. So what someone's done is they've gone, well, this is a good graphics card, I'm just going to bolt on a better cooler. Which was a thing people did back then. I don't know if people still do that today. I guess we can overclock it. That's something we can do. Okay, we have got no controls again, right? Well, the card's steam stable. Let's restart it real quick. I think my favourite thing is how much weight is on the PCB from this stupid cooler, where it was just bent over the years, but it is working. Someone has added little VRM heatsinks. I have no idea where this came from. I must have bought it years ago. I'll have to try and find the receipt or something, or maybe it came in a computer. Only a graphics card like this could reboot to this resolution, whatever this is. We've taken this out of a cupboard. We don't know what it is. I mean, we do sort of know what it is now. Get some drivers on here and find out, can it overclock a little bit? We now actually have some control over the card. So let's see if we can whack an overclock on it real quick. It's not even worth selling. I don't really know what to do with this card. Maybe I can give it to someone. 1250. No, 1250 is too much. And let's see what we can tune up on the memory. 1800 is too much. Okay, so we can do about 1190 on the core, and we have gone too far on the memory. We have gone far too far on the memory because I'm going to have to restart the PC now. But we're making some progress for a card that has no use or purpose to me whatsoever. Save that. You know, I'm so confident this will work now, they're just going to run it through 3D Mark. It'll just be fine. It'll just work. I guarantee it. This might have actually just gotten a little bit more interesting. So as it would happen, this card is not a HD 7870, it's a HD 7870 XT, which, to most people, that probably just means that's just the end name of a normal graphics card. What makes it so exciting? The 7870 XT wasn't actually a 7870, it was a cut down 7970. So to give you an idea, all they did was take the big flagship, lop a few bits off and I think change the memory bus, and then sold the cut down cards as the XT variant here. In real terms, if this actually had a proper name, it would be the 7930 or something along those lines, meaning this is actually quite an interesting graphics card, because it actually has a little bit of history to it. Now, the history is not very long and exciting, I'm not going to bore you with it. It does look like this card was once a VTX variant, so I was right on that call there, because I've just brought up the page, and it looks the exact same. So they were chucking a card that was, once again, a cut-down flagship, and selling it with one single fan on it, which is why someone bodged an upgraded cooler on there. It doesn't necessarily make this card particularly fantastic, but it does explain a few things, such as why the card shows up in GPU-Z as a 280X. Because it is closer to that card than it is a 7870, which would be the 270X. So maybe this video is actually a little bit interesting? It shouldn't be, but apparently it is. Apparently this card is actually not too bad on paper. Just in case anyone was wondering what I meant by this was a cut-down 7970 chip, when you look at the specifications you notice that it really doesn't line up with a normal 7870, because it isn't. It comes in based on GCN1, but is the Tahiti LE variant, which is a cut-down version of the full Tahiti chip found in the 7970, and it's rebranded 280X, which is it's the reason this shows up as a 280X because we're using modded drivers. It shows up as the latest version of the card. We have 2GB of GDDR5 VRAM and a 256-bit memory bus, which is cut down from the 384 of the full chip. We have modded driver support until 2023, 1,536 cores, 96 TMUs and 32 ROPs. Being GCN1 based, it does mean you get basic DirectX 12 support and Vulkan support, as well as AMD VCE. Fortunately for me, this cost me nothing because I found it in my drawer, but this can cost around 15 to 50 quid. It is not a cheap graphics card, and we will be touching more on that later. But just how good is a 7870 XT? And does that XT name mean that it's any good in the benchmarks? Starting off the benchmarks, we actually saw some rather surprising performance from GTA 5 Enhanced, with around 59 FPS on average and some really solid frame times as well. It's also worth noting that this graphics card, well, it doesn't have any optimizations for this game at all, as the modded drivers, well, as new as they are now a couple of years out of date. But still, with high settings and HBAO enabled, we saw the game fully playable in 1080p with no problems whatsoever. In fact, if you were aiming for a 30 FPS experience, you could probably turn a few things up to Ultra. Just the texture settings? Well, you're not really going much higher than this because, well, you've only got 2GB of VRAM. Next up we had GTA Online, which ran really rather well with 72 FPS on average and not quite the same stable frame times as the Enhanced Edition, but given how much this game struggles with utilization on even the latest and greatest cards, it was nice to see that with high settings and AMD CHS shadows enabled in a 1080p resolution, well, GTA Online still runs as good as it did back in the day, which is nice to see given this game's inherent optimization problems, especially in those larger lobbies. But I can safely say that I got away with a good 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay with no frame drops or too many problems, and that was in a fully packed out server. So for this card, it's nice to see that even back in the day it was a good choice. Not that I'm going to say it's a good choice today, but it goes to show that maybe they were onto something with the release of this card. But being able to play GTA, as impressive as it is with the Enhanced Edition and the current state of Online, it's not quite the same as running a brand new title out there with City Skylines 2. And unfortunately, this card seemed like it was able to do slightly higher settings than this, up until we went through the VRAM usage and then the performance just plummeted. So the only way to actually get City Skylines 2 playable on a 7870 XT was to use the 480p resolution, which was a bit of a shame as we were at least seeing this game playable on the full version of this chip, the 7970, in 720p. So it goes to show that 1GB extra VRAM that is on the full chip is definitely more than useful. But still, performance here was very solid and is actually a good chunk better than I was expecting, given it doesn't run very well on the actual 7870 or 7850 chips that you'd think this card is from. So City Skylines 2 is playable, and I did get away with playing a bit too much of it. I usually quite enjoy getting through this benchmark because I'm just building up the city as we go through these, but we saw the game playable, we just had to use rather low settings. Now, one area that it seems to be this architecture deals with really well is BeamNG. We saw it a couple of weeks ago on the 7970, and we've seen it more recently with the Fury chips and the RX 480 chips and all of these AMD chips that tend to deal with this game remarkably well. And here was no exception, with 37 FPS on average, using a mixture of medium and high settings in the jungle map, which tends to be one of the more intensive options out there. Now, once again, it is worth noting that simpler maps and scenarios would see you get over 60 FPS, so as a worst case scenario, you are still able to play the game in full 1080p with a decent average frame rate. Keep in mind, with the price these cards sell for, that is not actually very good, but under the context of its release, where you were getting a cut-down flagship that is still managing these games that look pretty good today at a decent frame rate, for those people that bought this, I wouldn't be surprised if they're still using them. Next up was Counter-Strike 2, and it was nice to see that the game was actually relatively playable and actually did feel somewhat competitive when going through the built-in benchmark and actual gameplay, which was a nice change to see. With 115 FPS on average, which for once was actually higher in competitive scenarios, we saw that the game was more than playable. Now, it did suffer with the usual GCN problems of during your first few minutes of gameplay there would be a few hitches and stutters, which is prominent even in the workshop benchmark. It will not do it on your second run, but it will do it on your first, so when there is lots of explosions going on, it just causes the card to freeze up for a split second. Once you've got through this, well, the card runs perfectly fine, so in terms of actual a bit of basic competitive gaming, well, the 7870 XT is still hanging in there. Now, when it came to Cyberpunk 2077, things are looking pretty good here during the built-in benchmark. I mean, I didn't know this game actually supported a 4:3 resolution until today, but with low settings it actually still does look remarkably good. Now, the average frame rate from the benchmark would lead you to believe you're seeing just shy of 60 FPS in a lot of situations, but as we've learned to know from these lower-end cards, that benchmark tends to be a bit too optimistic. When we actually went in-game and tried to cause a bit of trouble in the actual town, well, performance did see not around half, it was slightly over half of the actual frame rate from the benchmark, with 35 FPS on average, but not too terrible frame times. I mean, we're seeing it bounce between 30 to 40 FPS a lot of the time. I think we dropped down just beneath 30 FPS once or twice when there was lots of explosions going on. But what is still impressive here is Cyberpunk 2077 didn't just look pretty decent, it actually ran okay. When it comes to the peak of optimization though, we did have Mount & Blade Bannerlord, which on cards with this little VRAM I have noticed it does tend to stutter in the benchmark just a tad, which is reminiscent of the performance in the late game, but then again it does go away quite quickly. It just seems to be a problem, probably due to drivers being unsupported, but it is something that GCN tends to deal with quite well and does resolve itself after a few minutes of gameplay. Either way, we saw 60 FPS on average with medium and high settings, and 40 FPS 1% lows, which was mostly caused by the occasional hitch or stutter, which was there on the first run of the benchmark. Now keep in mind, as I said, those do go away, but Mount & Blade Bannerlord looks and runs great in 1080p and is no problems for what is now a 13-year-old weird cut-down flagship that was sold under what I can honestly say at this point is just completely the wrong name. Now, this one was a nightmare to get running and all set up, given that I absolutely hate the VRAM limits in Red Dead Redemption 2, and it tends to just be far too dramatic about how much VRAM you're actually going to use. So after about 6 or 7 restarts, I was still unable to change the resolution up to 1080p, so in the end I settled on 720p using medium and high settings with the textures set to low. And the game looks pretty fantastic like this. I mean, you're looking at a very much PlayStation 4, probably slightly better than a PS4 and Xbox One style experience, with a slightly better frame rate. Now, don't get me wrong, it takes a long time to get it to this point and set it all up. Honestly, you're probably better off just going into the config file and setting it all yourself manually, but Red Dead Redemption 2 does run remarkably well here.
With Tiny Glade here, I'd noticed the game had done an update, and it was one of those games that I thought, well, I can't test it on older graphics cards, it's got some form of forced ray tracing, doesn't it? But I think it's actually one of those built-in custom implementations. Either way, the game looks absolutely fantastic, and I didn't realise how much I'd actually enjoy playing a little bit of it. So my first time actually playing this game is actually on the HD 7870 XT, and you don't get much in terms of graphical options, so what you can do is leave the game at default, and then scale the resolution back a little bit. So what you're seeing is 0.8 times of 1080p, which still looked really rather good, and thanks to actually decent scaling on the graphics card, you don't have to worry too much about the output quality. So it's nice to see that some of those newer indie games, well, provided you don't mind turning the resolution down slightly, you're still seeing a better resolution than City Skylines, Cyberpunk, and you are going to get away with a great experience. So it was nice to see that one run. Overall performance, well, it's difficult to summarise really, because this card is very much not a 7870. The performance here goes to show that it really isn't. And I mean, there's a good couple of takeaways from this, such as you can see why the 7970 is holding up so well with that extra 1GB of VRAM that is sorely missing on this card here. But so much of this makes sense. I can't believe I didn't notice this wasn't an XT chip until the end of 3D Mark. Because at the end of 3D Mark, sure, even with an overclock, we weren't exactly at 7970 performance, but we were seeing at least encroaching in on that slightly. Now, we are lacking in VRAM, and it does notice in a lot of titles like Cyberpunk, where you can't go over a certain resolution because it simply doesn't have the VRAM for it. City Skylines 2 was bit disappointing, but then again, it is quite an intensive and VRAM hogging title, and even then we did get it playable. So the 7870 XT's overall performance, I can just say that AMD got the naming scheme wrong with this. I understand they were defective chips, but this would have made, I mean, it was a good card, very highly recommended, but it wasn't a big seller from what I understand. And the big issue why is because if they'd sold this as the 7930, well, it would have got a little bit more interest, because that is what it really is. It is the entry to the flagships. It's not a 7870, it's not a mid-range card, it's closer to a high-end card. So, it's an interesting one there, but the overall performance in 2025 is still rather admirable, and I'm sure I've tested the 7870 before and it didn't perform this well. So there we have it, a bit of a weird flying video on the 7870 XT, a card that honestly I'd completely forgot existed, because why does it exist? It's a good card under the wrong name, and can I say to go out and buy one today based on this performance? Well, definitely not. There is no reason to buy this card, because they've become a little bit of a collector's piece because of the rarity. I can't understand why, because you can go and get a 7970 for easily around £20 or $20. You can get an RX 480 for around $30 or around £30. I mean, we even took a chance on a broken RX 580, and the performance there was admittedly better than this. So this card serves no purpose in 2025 other than being a cool and weird card that is a flagship, but it's not a flagship. In terms of actual usability on the market, this is terrible value. Just do not buy one of these. It's a cool historical point, and I'm guessing that's why I must have whacked it in a drawer at some point years ago, is because I thought maybe we'll revisit this. But it's just been so long gone from my memory that I've not bothered. Either way, it's nice to see that, you know, AMD's naming scheme is still stupid, because, I mean, there's no words. I'm trying to think of something to say about their naming scheme, but they've started using the XT name again, I think, but maybe it's for a better reason than this. Who knows? Either way, back here, the XT seemed to mean you got a flagship but under a different name, and then before that I remember was the X800 XT and those versions. I'm going to confuse myself too much thinking about it. Either way, this is just a little fun video. I've just had a £40 Alienware PC arrive, which is what I've been waiting on for ages, and I'm off to go and see Oasis in Edinburgh, so I will catch you all probably next week. So thank you very much for watching, and good night.